Now I'd like to open the meeting to the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Pilar from New York, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I would like to express gratitude for the solution of a situation I have been praying about. I applied for Medicare online 3 months before my birthday, and immediately Mortal Mind started its antics of fear and intimidation in the guise that I didn't have the required documentation that was needed and all sorts of things. I worked with a practitioner from this church who was very confident that everything that I ever needed would be realized, and that what was right for me to have, no one can take away or deny. Well, I finally got to the last few minutes time to apply, so to speak, and so I did again apply online, and this time I received a notification in the mail that they needed certain documents to verify my birth date and the naturalization status. I made a decision to go in person rather than mail the documents I had to my nearest Medicare office. So the day arrived, and early in the morning I started getting ready, and lo and behold, I couldn't find my birth certificate. So again, Mortal Mind started with its fears and panic that I was not going to find it, and this was going to, and all kinds of scenarios started going through my head of what was going to happen once I got there. So I also contacted the practitioner again, and this time she said that this was aggressive mental suggestion and that the Christ goes before you. This really helped me to calm me down, and I proceeded to go to the appointment with what I had, my passport, ID card, Social Security, and all kinds of documents that I could help put my hands on just in case that it will be helpful. So also for the past few days I had been working and pondering the phrase from, I believe it's Mary Baker Eddy's the Blue Book. In my Father's side there are no closed doors, no obstacles, there are no impossibilities. This was very, very helpful to me, and it gave me a lot of confidence. So I kept this in mind while I was going there, and my number was called, and the young man that was at the window helping me asked to see my documentation and IDs, and I produced all of that. He just kept entering information in the computer and asked me a few questions, and then told me he was going to take a copy of the passport. He came back and handed me my documentations and said, okay, you're done. I was really shocked because I was ready for a battle, and mental mind kept insinuating, this is going to take a long time. You will have to come back again, and so on. So I asked this young man, well, what else should I do, or what next? And he said, nothing. It's all done, and dismissed me. Well, let me tell you, I was kind of a little bit, a Mortal Mind was disappointed, I guess. But suddenly, that noisy chatterbox was very quiet, and I was left wondering if this is what they mean when you listen people saying, be still and know that I'm God. It's not an elation feeling, but it's a quietness and peace and assurance that God was with me all the time, and in His sight there are no closed doors. I am very grateful for this demonstration, and I'm very grateful for the assistance that I got from the practitioner and for this church and for the readings, for the music and everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Colleen from Massachusetts.
Good evening. I would like to share a thought I've been having recently. I've come to this church quite a few months ago, and I am so grateful to every member of this church and everyone who participates everyone brings something to this church, and it has helped me. And I picture this church like a beautiful light, and every member I feel is like an angel. And when I came to the church, I felt that I was in like a pit of air and darkness and a lot of bad things. And I felt outstretched arms of love. And so I feel that I have been lifted out of a pit of error, and I know that every member of this church does that for everyone who comes here. This is a church of love, and your table is filled with fruit and water and drink for those who are thirsty and hungry. And I understand my responsibility is to reach out my arms and pull someone else up, and to continue until everyone is out and in safety and living in love and truth. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Good evening. Recently, I was awakened during the night hours with a sore throat. Immediately, I remembered one of the statements of Peter Ross that he repeatedly mentions in his book, Leaves of Healing. Quote, "Perfect God and perfect man, and I am that man." I went back to sleep and did not waken until about 6 a.m. the following morning, with not a trace of the sore throat. I am most grateful for this rapid change from illness to wellness. Although this happened approximately a week ago, not a slight indication of the sore throat has ever appeared. Thank you, most assuredly.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I am very grateful that Christian Science has shown me how to live life increasingly free of stress. Before coming here, I was perpetually stressed. I wasn't sure how to how to best live my life, how to know if I was making the right decisions, how to do anything really. So many voices seemed to be telling me this or that, and in the end, since I was trying to live without God, I was just confused and lost. Everything I have learned in Plainfield has shown me how to listen for just one voice, God's. What a wonderful blessing this has been, to go through each day only seeking to do what He wants me to do. An additional blessing is how this church has ample methods to support me through the day, such as the weekly lessons, website materials, and practitioner support. Because of that, I am never without the tools to counter the claims that would bring stress. I would not have been able to achieve any of this without God bringing me here to learn Christian Science. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda.
I am very grateful for all that I'm learning here and my practitioner at Plainfield. It is helping me turn my life around for good and to get closer to God. I have learned more in the couple of years here than in decades of Christian Science that I had before. Recently, in our last Sunday's roundtable, it was discussed about the importance of watching your thinking and where your thinking's taking you. In 2 Timothy 4:2, it says, quote, "Preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort, with all long-suffering and doctrine," end quote. One thing I am grateful for is the rebukes I have received here. They are different than the world's corrections in that they are intended to wake your thought from drifting away from God, and it has a healing effect if you learn from it. Sometimes we don't realize we are drifting away from God because the subtle way negative thoughts seep in for acceptance For me, it has been a continual battle not to be caught up into any type of sympathy. This is not love based on God, but a personal sense of doing good or pity for another. So it becomes a hindrance instead of a blessing, and it leads one away from God's healing love. Having seen the results of personal sense of love and a divine sense of love that is of God, there is no comparison whatsoever. So I am grateful for the needed rebukes to get my thinking back on the right track and in line with biblical principles and laws. A recent rebuke served to alert me to the greater need of watching my thinking with discipline, focus, and self-awareness. I am very grateful for Jesus' teaching, Mary Baker Eddy's writings, and this church that strives to live the Word of God. Thank you.
Thank you. Day from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm thankful for this week's Watching Point 102, which reads, quote, "Watch that you turn every untoward circumstance and experience to your spiritual advantage," unquote. Before coming to this church, I would immediately worry, panic, or be afraid when suddenly met with adversity, and would most often remain that way until the problem was solved or I was freed from the situation. Thanks to the Christian Science taught in this church, which has given me the understanding of God's omnipotence, omnipresence, and omniscience, I'm better able to remain poised when I'm tempted to be thrown off by negative claims. Instead of going down with error, I'm better able to use the tools that I've been given to stand up to it, understanding its nothingness, and knowing that each challenge I meet can only make me stronger, and as a result, make me a better worker for God, which is my real purpose for being. I'm thankful for the truth that I'm learning, which is lifting me higher and strengthening my understanding. Thank you so much for all the work that continues to go on here. I'm so grateful for every bit of it. Thank you all for all that you're doing. Thank you for tonight's testimonies. I'm grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mike from New York, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful readings again tonight and the testimonies and the beautiful hymns. Last week I winterized our 3 vehicles. It involved quite a bit of crawling under them, and generally I get pretty sore after a couple of days of doing that. This time I kept my mind on God very well, didn't get sore at all. I also checked my neighbor's vehicles. I assumed I would only have one of them to look at, and then could go on to other projects. As it turned out, the second car was having issues too. Not a big deal, but evidently I wasn't being a cheerful giver because I wasn't in the proper frame of mind. And the following morning I woke up sore all over. It was such a stark difference I couldn't mistake what had happened from not dealing with my negative mental attitude right away. Fortunately, I had started reading sermons and articles on Christian Science by Doris White Evans, and had the previous evening read an article called Choices. My routine over the years has been to feed kids, animals, and myself first thing in the morning, not always in that order, and then take quite yet time to do the lesson sermon. Mrs. Evans states in the article we can choose to place our service to God first or not. She states that we can choose to have a good day or a bad day. How many years have I known to do the lesson sermon first? Finally, that morning, it was the accepted time to choose to do things right, and I did my studies first. As I was reading the lesson and felt any belief of soreness, I chose not to tolerate that thought. Anytime I was distracted by anything negative, I followed the Plainfield member's instruction and said, "I know who you are, that you're trying to separate me from God, and I'm not interested." By the time I was done with the lesson sermon, the belief of soreness was gone. I'm extremely grateful to God, Christ Jesus, and Mary Baker Eddy for what they have done to teach and kind Christian Science. I'm extremely grateful to Mrs. Evans for her God-bestowed spiritual inspiration in being able to make Christian Science practical and useful, even to those like myself who don't have that exceptional spiritual insight. I'm so grateful to Mrs. Evans' loyal students who are so nobly carrying on this work, and their wonderful recollections of her that they share on a regular basis. I am so grateful to be here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dale from Virginia, go ahead.
Thank you for those wonderful readings tonight and the wonderful testimonies and the beautiful music. I'm grateful for the Bible lessons in this independent church and the teaching we have here in the Bible studies and roundtable sessions. In the Sunday, October 29 roundtable on the lesson on everlasting punishment, we learned about the accuser from the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 10. We were alerted to have our armor on always, to be alert and kill the error, and you'll no longer fear it, to handle a claim each time and its effect gets less until it disappears. And that last thought was from the Blue Book, page 205. Recently, I was having support from a practitioner in this church and was told that any claims would just be accuser, and was given thoughts to work with to stick with the truth, including what our leader says and ways that are vain, from Miscellany by Mary Baker Eddy. On Sunday, I awoke with a little crick in my neck, which shortly went away. But at dinner that day, I was struck with great pain in my neck and couldn't move my head. My husband looked alarmed, but I said, "This is only a lie, and I'm not going to accept it. I'm fine." I immediately thought of the accuser and knew that it was only a lie, and I didn't have to accept it. Right then, I thanked God, knew that He was right with me, and all was well. Years ago, I had experiences like this and suffered for days. But this time, within minutes, I was free. In fact, the next morning, I worked outside with my husband as we had to tie back some big, sweeping limbs of a row of evergreen cryptomerias so that a split-rail fence could be replaced on our property. I am very grateful to be constantly learning about the freedom that I and everyone else is free to possess through a growing understanding of our oneness with a good and loving Father, Mother, God. I'm very grateful for Mary Baker Eddy and her dedication in following the Christ. The practitioners in this church who are ever available to meet the need with love, strength, and healing, and for the teachings in this independent church.
Thank you. Gary.
I'm grateful for so many lessons that I have learned in this church over the years. Recently, my business partner and I have been feeling a great deal of pressure at business, and it reminded me of a wonderful lesson that I started to learn many years ago and continue to strive to learn. When I first got to this church, it seemed like I was always doing things under pressure. Sometimes I would even seek out pressured situations, and sometimes thought I would relish, the pressure of trying to do things under pressure. Well, what I found was that I would often make mistakes trying to do things under pressure, that I would have to go back and take even more time to correct those mistakes. And I remember one day asking the help of a practitioner in this church for this, because it was getting clear to me that this was something I needed help with. And the practitioner had exactly what I needed and was very helpful to me, and pointed out that the word pressure appears only once in the Christian Science textbook. And it says that a Christian scientist must live under the constant pressure of the apostolic command to come out from the material world and be separate. And that gave me a lot to work with. The constant pressure of the apostolic command to come out from the material world and be separate. And the practitioner went on to explain that that was the only legitimate pressure. Any other pressure was animal magnetism, was the human mind trying to push me around. And it was actually egotistical of me to think that that was a good thing. And went on to explain that the worst thing I can do is to actually give in to the pressure if it's not from God. And the only thing that I should do when I feel pressure is to calmly stop and ask God, is this pressure from you, God, or is it not? What would you like me to do? Well, when I started disciplining myself to do this, whenever I would feel pressure, instead of running around and reacting and trying to get something done, ask God, is this from you? Is this something you want me to do or not? Once I started disciplining my thought, wonderful things happened. A lot of things that I thought I should do turned out it didn't really need to do. And I found myself making far, far fewer mistakes and having to spend a lot less time going back to fix them. So I'm grateful for this lesson, that God has the answer for everything, and that there is only one pressure that is legitimate in our lives. I'm so grateful for Mrs. Eddy's teachings, for the help that I received from a practitioner in this church, and I'm so grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Chardell.
Thank you for the readings on our true inheritance and for this service tonight. I wanted to share an experience I had last week that included prayer that led to a nice demonstration. My grandson came home around 5 one evening with a small pocketbook that he had found in the middle of a road in front of a store, and the cars were starting to run over it. We looked in the purse for identification. He went on Facebook after finding a young woman's driver's license that said she was from Illinois, and I called a telephone number from a card that contained her last name. I left a message with my name and phone number. I had been praying to know what steps to take, and I remembered being taught here not to go ahead of what God wants, and not to wait too long and miss God's direction. I felt that I should hand this purse over to the police, but didn't know when or if this was the right thing. A little before 7, after everyone had left the house, it came strongly to me to call the police. Here's the good part. As the police car was coming down the driveway, my phone rang, and it was the woman in search of her purse. I handed the phone and the purse to the officer, and everything was arranged by him, giving her directions to the police station. Thank you, Plainfield Church, for teaching us how to listen and to trust God, not too fast and not too slow. Thank you.
Thank you. Fairley from Maryland, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to express my gratitude for being here tonight, and thank you very much for those readings on inheritance. It brought to mind my thought about growing up in the South, where often people's qualities were referred to, and sometimes their negative qualities were referred to. Well, she's like her great aunt, or that's the kind of thing her grandmother used to do. It was always human inheritance, and so it was wonderful to hear these readings tonight, because that's the absolute truth, that our inheritance is from God. And I must say that everything that's here, that we have here at Plainfield, has revolutionized my life since I came here about 7 years ago. With all the teaching that goes on, my ever-available practitioner, which I've never had before, someone who's always there to help me. And I thought the other day, I just realized I hadn't had a cold for several years. But when I first came to Plainfield, I seemed to have a cold at least once every fall or every spring, and sometimes it would persist a long time. And my practitioner at that time told me about the article called "I've Got Cold" in Mrs. Eddy's miscellaneous writings. I tried to work with that. In it, when the child, Mrs. Eddy speaks about, says to the doctor, "I've got cold," Mrs. Eddy points out, what if that sweet child, so bravely confessing that she had something that she ought not to have, and which Mama thought must be gotten rid of, had been taught the value of saying even more bravely and believing it, "I have not got cold." So I began to say, when I would get a cold, "I have not got cold." But it took a couple of years, and now I'm looking back, I haven't had a cold in several years. It never crosses my mind anymore. That completely eradicated it from my experience. So that's, in some ways, not the worst thing that can happen to one, to have a cold. But I'm very grateful for learning and growing in my spiritual self and my freedom from any claim. Thank you very much for those readings.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for those beautiful readings, the citations, and so beautifully read. Reading the excerpts from Collectania, which is featured on our website carousel right now, it occurred to me that in all those years that I remained so fearful, I really allowed error to have a field day with me and never even questioned the feeling. I always went with it, felt it was real, and never did anything and suffered from it. Mrs. Eddy clearly teaches that fear is an underlying lie in every discord, be it physical illness, emotional distress, stress, false sense of lack, anything. So she tells us to handle fear, and she shows us also how to do it. Reading that article, it gave me some ideas as to how we can question fear, anxiety, worry when they come up, and not just let it have what it wants with us. Some of these questions are this: is God not omnipotent and here right now? Am I not God's idea? Why should an idea of God be afraid? Is there anything outside of God or beyond Him? Is there anything in God to fear, since the scriptures say, "In Him I live, move, and have my being"? I feel that when we answer the questions, it will lead us to thinking correctly, to recognizing God's omnipotence and omnipresence. And that helps us to quiet the fear and know that they don't belong to us and that, in fact, they are unreal.
We don't own them. And from that, we can replace them with what is true, God's love, ever present, and know also that that feeling has no power and it cannot mesmerize us. Such use of what we have been given through Mrs. Eddy's writings all help us to free ourselves, to finally be free, truly free from the bondage of fear. I'm so grateful to be here tonight for all the testimonies, the music, the hymns. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary.
Things, a few letters. First, Florida, Dear Plainfield Christian Science Church. Enclosed, please find a donation. I hope you will apply it to maintain your website. I visit it daily. Sincerely. And then Virginia, dear fellow members, my heart is filled with gratitude to be associated with this independent Christian Science church, which is promoting Mary Baker Eddy's pure healing Christ science. It is a joy to be part of a cause to uplift and heal, to seek one's own and another's good, with love and gratitude. And then a few things from our church website bulletin board. The First, Pennsylvania. I wish to offer my gratitude for the readings called Love is the Fulfilling of the Law, given last Wednesday evening, November 1st. This healing message about God's everlasting love for his creation comes at a crucial time in our lives. The truth spoken, read, and shared here will uplift the world and keep us always vigilant to see God's work here and now. And then Florida, beautiful service. I enjoyed the organ music prelude and could feel the peace coming through the pipes. With my hymn book, I joyfully sang along. What a privilege to join in the meeting through your wonderful website and listen to the inspirational readings that lifted my heart. It was just what I needed to hear. When the Lord's Prayer was recited in unison, what a strong sense of dominion came through, as each member affirmed the truth with conviction and clarity. I've never heard the Lord's Prayer expressed so strongly by a group before, and felt the power of the words ringing out in the world. The testimonies were powerful too. Music is a joyful way to heal. Thank you all for everything. And then Massachusetts. I am so grateful for the awesome roundtable discussion and the following powerful Sunday service on everlasting punishment. I am learning that God creates and governs every right idea that constitutes our consciousness. If I seem to have a wrong sense of an idea, I can immediately release it and know that God blesses man with the right idea only. I trust and know his eternal ideas contain no evil, for God is love. From Science and Health. What an awesome God is our God. Thank you, Plainfield Church Independent, for the bountiful blessings you bestow on all that come to your table. And then also from the same person in Massachusetts, thanking Mike for hosting such a wonderful Bible study today. I learned so much. I found Jeremy's information so interesting, learning of the CERN Institute. Also, I love the explanation of the differences between the Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 view of Earth. The light and love which pours forth from every member of the Bible study meetings brings great understanding of spiritual truths. I'm so grateful to you all. Tonight it was read so beautifully on our topic about inheritance from Science and Health that the transmission of disease or of certain idiosyncrasies of mortal mind would be impossible if this great fact of being were learned, namely, that nothing inharmonious can enter being, for life is God. That is such a powerful statement and such an important one to be working with and to understand. This belief of a human inheritance is one we must be very alert to and to handle vigorously, really every day. That thought that nothing inharmonious can enter being because life is God, that can help heal in so many instances. Nothing inharmonious can enter your thought. Nothing inharmonious can enter your home. Nothing inharmonious can enter certainly your body. You can go on working with that thought because when you understand that your life is God, that's a total protection. How could anything inharmonious enter being when all is the result of a good God? He has created it all and blessed it all. I find, too, to know daily that He is the only creator. We are not personal creators, that He is our Father, Mother, God. Our inheritance is from Him and from Him alone, and also that we have created nothing. Not a child or business or any other thing you think you might have created. God is the creator of all. And in doing this, it relieves you of a very false responsibility. I found a poem, I believe it was in one of our old healing thoughts, and I remember finding great comfort in it. It's called Release, and it is this: in prayer I silence self and rise above my anxious human sense of those I dearly love. I place them all in God's wise care, knowing they are so much safer there. So grateful to be here tonight to hear all the inspired testimonies, the beautiful hymns and readings. It's always a healing event. Thank you all.
Thank you.